welcome everyone to Community and Economic Development Committee. Go around and say hello. I'm John Weddleton.
Big training.
Pete Peterson.
Francis McLaughlin.
Randy Elkirkland.
Erica McConnell. Mandy Honest. Amy DeMasi.
Phil Steyer, Chief Executive.
Lloyd Stiasny.
Marina Conco, Ice Architecture.
Pete Everhart, Momo's Bakery, and my wife Maureen went out to get her glasses that she printed off.
Madar Ward and Alaska Sense.
Evan Neal with the Alaska Sense Group.
Jedediah Smith, AMCO.
Okay, thanks. So the way we've been doing it, when we hit the case, go ahead and if it's yours, your Alaska Sense, go ahead and sit up here so if something comes up. And then what we'll do is we'll have staff reports and we'll have discussion amongst assembly members. So if you have something to add, just go like this and I'll wave at you. And kind of keyboard that way a little bit. But if you have something to say, we'll pick it up. And anybody else in the background, Jed, if you have something to add, just go like this. Okay, so we're starting with Alaska Sense. Mandy, you want to do a quick review?
So I was actually out of town when these came in and being reviewed. So Erica was the one who actually reviewed them. So I'm gonna hand it over to her and let her do her thing. So we did review Alaska Sense against the licensing regulations in Title 10 and found that they were in compliance with all regulations and have no additional recommended conditions.
Thank you. And this was Ryan.
Yes.
Review this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant, Bernard Wardley of Alaska Sense LLC, is applying for a special land use permit for a marijuana retail establishment totaling approximately 1,500 square feet of retail space within an existing industrial use building. The proposed facility is within an I-1 district generally located northeast of the intersection of Tudor Road and Bering Street. Petitioner has secured non-conforming rights with lack of visual enhancement landscaping along Tudor Road. Demolition of a non-conforming accessory structure located on the northeast corner of the parcel is shown in the provided site plan. After this structure is demolished, this parcel will be compliant with applicable dimensional standards in the I-1 district. A memorandum of understanding between the petitioner and the Midtown Community Council was submitted with their application. Ms. Ward has been active in addressing any concerns of neighboring businesses and has plans to remain an active participant with the Midtown Community Council. Plans submitted to the planning department do not show any major alterations to the building facade or structure that would make it of similar character, scale, or size when compared to surrounding structures. The planning department recommends approval of special land use permit subject to the conditions that state in the staff report. And this retail license does accompany a previously approved cultivation license approved on December 6th through Assembly Resolution 2016-234.
All right, thank you. What were the conditions?
There's the standard, I guess we call it boilerplate conditions placed on this retail license. The only specific one for the retail would be the retail sales establishment shall be closed to the public between 8 and 8 a.m.
Any comments from?
Just one. You know, that community council's not going to exist probably within the next 60 days. They're being merged with probably Midtown. It's going to be merged with North Star or maybe even Spinards. Just to let you know, track of it, it's just not going to exist.
Okay.
Due to lack of participation. There's normally about 5 people show up at that community council meeting. So they're going to be absorbed by another one. Just to let you know.
So is that, will we get like a notification or something of where we can follow up on the next step with that, or how do we
Track the assembly meetings.
Okay.
That'd be the easiest way.
Okay.
Or get on the email list for North Star and Spinard, and you'll know.
Because one of them's going to end up with it.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The only thing that I saw when I was reading this last night was there was somewhere you had mentioned that we were talking about putting up a pole sign. I'm pretty sure that those are not permitted. So I think we probably talked about that when they were here for the cultivation license. Maybe just didn't get removed or whatever. But that was the only thing I saw.
Right.
Correct, and then condition 6 of the special land use permit approval, it says signs of advertising marijuana establishment may be placed only in the marijuana establishment's window or attached to the outside of the licensed premises. So full sign.
Were you aware of that?
Yeah, well, I think that we had some original questions on what the signage, what our parameters were when we originally asked that question, since that was addressed.
Anything else, Amy? So you had a couple public comments on this one. They sound like next door neighbors, Polar Pediatric and Grand Claramoma. You aware of that?
Those were the earlier ones. I think we.
They're in this packet, so I don't know if they must have come.
We went through and we made efforts to follow up with everybody in the community and all the businesses around us.
Did you talk to them? Did you talk to them?
I'm sure somebody from our group did, have a couple of us that handle that. But if there's anything that we need to do to follow up with them in particular beyond what we've already done, we'd be happy to.
Well, it's good to get along with your neighbors.
Of course,
But
yeah.
they're in the packet here somewhere.
Very last page.
Last page.
Last one.
Yeah.
Where you're located at, the police should not be a problem.
What's that?
The police presence should not be a problem.
We're looking forward to having great neighbors.
Where you're at.
Yeah. It's
Are you
gonna be
gonna be
nice
able to
to
see
have
your
this.
building from Tudor or Bering or both?
Both. Yeah, yeah. It's a little setback, but it's right there.
Yes, but I know where it's at, off in the back. You guys were saying something about the automobile repair shop being gone, or what?
There was an automobile repair shop in the building when we originally took over the project, and all of the other tenants have vacated out, and we since have kind of built it all fresh inside. So just our building, just our. Thank you, John.
Is there anything else? So what did we say on Tuesday?
Send forward a recommendation to send it through with.
Second from Amy, okay, any opposition? Okay, good, good luck.
Thank you all, appreciate it. And we'll get with you to make sure we get you the book. Thank you.
Okay, next up is, we got Alaska Herb Garden.
Momo's Bakery.
There we go, Momo's, sorry. Wrong by the order. Momo's Bakery. Hi. Hi. Erica, you wanna go through it?
Yes, thank you. So during the licensing review of Momo's Bakery, there were a couple of, there were some inconsistent statements regarding both video surveillance and waste disposal. And so you'll see on page 3 of the packet that I did reach out to Ms. Edelhart to ask for some clarification on these two issues. The video surveillance, there was some confusion about whether there was going to be off-site storage of records or whether it was going to be on-site. And for the waste disposal, there were a couple of different elements in various locations in the narrative about what was going to happen to with the waste disposal. So I did request some clarification, and Ms. Edelhart responded right away and did clarify for those two issues. So you can see the answers on page 3. That's now considered part of the record, part of the application. So it didn't seem necessary to add any conditions onto the licensing portion of the resolution. So with those responses, the application met the requirements of Title 10, and again, no additional conditions were recommended.
Good, thank you. And this is Francis?
Yeah. So Momo's Bakery is a manufacturing license. It's a 900 square foot bakery. They're going to be making baked items from extract. They won't be engaging in extraction. So it's just bakery. The site or this part of the building was formerly a bakery. It's a 2-story building. It's the ammo can. The upstairs, the second floor is just storage. The owner of the ammo can owns the whole building. The area where Momo's Bakery would be is through a separate entrance in a room that's attached to the back of the MOPAN. They have sufficient space for parking. They have non-conforming rights for their lack of landscaping and other Title 21 required items. We didn't find any issues. We're recommending approval with a condition to revise the site plan to show the minimum required number of parking spaces. And there's sufficient space on the adjoining lot, and they have a shared parking agreement that's recorded. So all that needs to be shown is their design team just needs to show the parking spaces. Currently, the site plan shows the one required ADA handicap parking space, but Maureen and I have talked about it, and she's revised the drawing to show the 8 total required parking spaces. So that's the condition of approval that you'll see at the end of the list there. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Of course, Pete and Maureen are here.
Hold on, we'll go around and we'll give you a chance. We're gonna go around here.
Is Smart Road reconstruction going to have anything to do with this? Is that gonna mess up the parking at all, the reconstruction?
It's actually going to help their property right now. It's just a gravel parking lot, and with the, I talked to the owner of the AMOCAN, and he told me 2 things. He said, one, that there's an agreement with the state that this summer, with the road project, that this summer they're going to pave the parking area, so that'll be helpful to the owner and to this licensee or manufacturing license. The other thing the AMOCAN owner told me is that they know a little bit about site security. There's steel doors, and saw the cameras. It's separate entrances, totally. I mean, it's like a separate building, but it's attached to the AMOCAN. But so yeah, the road project is going to has obtained a public use easement across portions of the property along Spinard Road. So that will, I think, remove any parking that they may have had along the front of the property. But they've got this neighboring lot to the south that's under common ownership. And so 2 lots side by side, a building on one, nothing on the other. And they have a recorded shared parking agreement. They have non-conforming rights for the 2 lots. The 2 lots are dependent on one another. That's where the parking comes from. And that area will be paved under the road project. So it's square with the road project.
Thank you, sir.
Good thing. Anything else?
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I'm looking here at the map. Is this the lot here, or is it the one there?
Not the old Gwenny's site. It's the south of the south.
And so then once they get that blacktop in, they'll have to put lines on the parking.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks.
Anything else?
Yeah. So zoning type,
Zoning type? Oh, it's B3.
right? And so what I'm understanding is you have to explain to me, because my understanding is B3 has, if it's manufacturing, it also has to have a retail portion. So it says wholesale only, but I guess I was a little. This is the first one we're having where it sounds like their real focus is manufacturing. So B3 requires there's a retail portion. So how are we achieving that?
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's because there's no extraction. Do you remember off the top of your head?
My recollection, and if you look it up, is that cultivation has to have retail, manufacturing, if it's just, so we kind of brought this up and they said, well, since a bakery is allowed in B3, a marijuana manufacturing facility that's just doing things in a bakery would do, should also be allowed in the B3. So you're not allowed to do extraction in the B3, but if you're just essentially baking.
So that's the difference we're articulating here, because it wasn't clear to me. If it's manufacturing, we're saying that's okay, but if it's cultivation, then it definitely has to have retail.
Only certain types of manufacturing, so baking only.
So, in this one, because it wasn't clear to me when I was reading it. So can you point me to where the interpretation is coming from? I was gonna say, I'm confident if anybody can find it, it's Francis.
Yeah, no, I'm just
I couldn't find it. It wasn't clear to me. It was kind of clear as mud.
Yeah, marijuana manufacturing facilities that only manufacture edibles but do not have extraction facilities or other types of manufacturing are permitted in the B3.
Okay, I totally missed that. What is our, the code reference stuff?
It's in Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21.05.050, B2B triple I.
Of course, I remember this in page law.
I missed it. Yeah, help. Thank you.
In this version, it's chapter 5, page 79.
Sorry, I forgot my glasses.
Yeah, it's small.
I'm trying.
Gluten-free, oh yeah, it's healthy.
Manufacturing facilities that only
Never figured out what to do
but
with
do not
gluten-free.
have extraction.
Oh, I could send you the gluten, I kinda like gluten.
Okay, all right. That's definitely there. I just didn't see it. Okay, thank you. And I didn't see it today either. So I'm
It's a question for you. I see you're gonna be buying the concentrate. Do you weigh the concentrate when it comes in, and then you detail how it's being dispensed, or what's to stop somebody from taking the concentrate and just selling it in the open market?
Well, we're baking, I mean, they are selling it to other retail stores, but we'll buy it in bulk. And then, yeah, it's all weighed, it's all in metric, so it's all weighed, it's all been tested, and then we divide it out, we put in our stuff, and then that has to be tested. Yeah, and then we get it back, but,
I'm just
know what you
wondering,
mean.
does the state require you to account for the weight of the concentrate? I wanna make sure the concentrate's not being sold by you guys potentially on the open market.
I see, well, since our stuff has to be tested, it's gonna have to be, 5 milligrams per piece. I mean, they know all of our things for 1 milligram. I mean, yeah, we're buying it, we have to put it in metric, and then we use it all up, and then we have to put, like, how much we used in each of these batches, and our lot numbers. And then those have to be tested before we can sell them.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yeah, they have to be tested.
You're the first bakery, so we're gonna,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
we're trying to learn as we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And so, like a retail store, though, you are required to have cameras, is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So that there will be cameras watching the bakers.
You bet.
And so to be able to keep track of all the
We've got,
product.
what, 6 cameras?
Right.
Yeah.
We've got 6 cameras that cover everything.
So, yeah, I don't see a problem here. And I was noticing, or reading your recipes, and I was a little hungry at the time.
Well, we have
Some of those chocolates sounded good. The caramel sounded really good, but I noticed that you are mixing things with coconut oil or coconut something. Is that something that they do industry-wide, or?
They do, because it really disperses the concentrate really well, and the fat holds to it, so that when you put it in the coconut oil or butter and put it homogenizes, make sure that it's equally
Uniform.
dispersed, uniform, yeah.
Makes you uniform.
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering. All right, thank you.
Oh, no, my only question was about the zoning district.
Let's just get back to this. So you make a batch of brownies in the morning, and you have to send it to get tested that day, every batch?
Every batch, but like we can do a batch of 15 handfuls, sheets, so that could be, so yeah, we mix it up, do them, we have to take 2 to the tester, and then we wait for them and bring them back. If it doesn't make it, then we have to destroy them.
Wow. So how long does it take to get them tested?
Well, I don't know, we haven't done it yet.
Well,
I think we only have 2
we don't know.
Yeah, I
It
think you
should
said
be
about
a day turnaround.
Yeah. We
So
have
fresh from the
freezers.
oven's not gonna happen.
No, yeah, you're right.
Brownies straight out of the oven. Best.
Right.
And then we package.
Yeah, I
This
noticed
will
they
hold
contain-
5.
So is it peanut
5
free?
pieces.
Can I see your container? I love sweets, but I probably won't be buying yours.
Oh, come on.
So offhand, so I noticed everything's in this container, right? Why this container, right, not a box?
We consulted right off the bat with a company in Colorado, and they had a lot of success with this too. It keeps the product fresh, even though each one is individually wrapped, and it's really childproof. I mean, you try to open that, and so we thought, this is
It'd be a classic on the top, probably.
Yeah, there'll be
That'd be a
yeah.
tamper.
Childproof.
Oh, I was gonna say that, I'm like,
But in any case, that's an expensive item, and we wanted to go with something that would be sufficient, so.
So you ordered those in bulk?
I know.
Yep.
Will you guys mark that where there's peanuts involved in this at all? You don't use peanuts, I take it.
We don't.
There's a
but
lot of
it-
people with peanut allergies. I wanna
Right.
make sure you.
And we have the allergens on the back, if there's egg, if there's lactose, milk, but if there's almond or coconut, so yeah, everything is marked. No peanuts.
you know, it just makes me think, because a lot of times when I think of brownies, I think of brownies with ice cream. Has anybody thought about?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the refrigeration and all that kind of stuff would probably be costly to get into, but.
Yeah, they have, baked Alaska who left, they were doing, cannabis ice cream.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they left. Yeah.
And you probably already know this, but one of my roommates was watching TV the other day, and as I was on my way out the door, I looked over and there was a program on TV that all it was about was cooking with marijuana. I mean, and I guess it's on like every day. And I don't know if, I think it's the Vice channel.
Oh, yeah.
And, so.
You have to apply to get that channel specially?
No, it's on the basic cable.
I know.
I don't get that.
It was news to me, that they were cooking down in California somewhere.
It's not just me, but it's excellent. There's a lot of
I know childproof,
Okay, kids, quit playing.
it may be somebody that has arthritis and me, arthritis proof, but not necessarily children.
Okay, any more comments?
No, I think they addressed everything that I was concerned about. I make a motion that we send this forward to the assembly.
I'll say that.
Any opposition? Okay, good luck.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to Spinard. There is a Spinard Chamber of Commerce, right? That we brought over.
They came and spoke,
Now we've got a bakery.
Okay.
I like your idea of a chocolate ice cream. Marijuana.
That was the reason I told you, because they were actually making. Yeah. They mixed the marijuana concentrate stuff in with like butter, and they use this butter
Oh, that's your base.
to make the ice cream.
This is sort of tied together.
You know, if you have, let's say, you got a bakery and then you've got the gun shop downstairs.
Yeah, I've got the same, it's all fancy.
Yeah, but if people want, don't forget where you get it. If people are gonna burgerize the dumpster, burgerize the bakery. No, not little, but if you take a look at the, now they cutting the lot of ATM.
I don't mind doing both.
It's like crazy. Still a good friend of
Up to, you want to do them together, or is it easier to keep them separate?
Whatever you like.
Basically, the pack is the same, so.
Together.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do both together, just kind of have one discussion, so. We'll get, who's this, Erica?
Yeah, sure. So, we didn't have, any issues with the retail store, but I wanted to draw your attention, if you look at, so if we're looking at the retail packet, page 71, this is actually for the cultivation facility. If you look at the main entry to the retail store, and then you go in and then you go through to the cultivation facility, there was no camera that was pointed at the cultivation side of the door between the retail and the cultivation facility. So I did discuss this with the chief of enforcement at the state. We agreed that there would need to be a camera pointing down the hall towards the entry of the cultivation facility. So that was the only issue that we had found in the review of the retail and the cultivation. So that is a recommended condition of approval on the cultivation facility.
site. This is in the I-1 district. The cultivation side is gonna be 2,931 square feet, and the retail side is gonna be 623 square feet. It's in the Tucker Campbell Community Council, and it's located at 6511 Artist Square Road, which is kinda down there by K&L Distributors and Air the Queen. He's actually right across the street from that. So it's in a pretty industrial area, and it's a little bit smaller of a building. He meets all the applicable zoning regulations. There's no response received from any comments back. We mailed out 130 notices. He has there's a couple, they came in and met with us, just as about when the staff packet was prepared to kind of go over their building permit situation. We have a couple, they got resolved with T-Ash Electric, the power load. They also have to resolve some of the parking and circulation issues, although they do usually have some non-conforming rights on the property. And then the site plan, they didn't show the snow slope, but they've got plenty of that behind the building is wide open. So I believe they've actually kind of updated their site plan already in anticipation of all this. So if it gets approved by December, they'll be ready to get there pretty quickly.
Any comments from the community council?
No, there was no comments. I was just gonna double check again.
Did you guys go to the community council?
Yes, we did, and we got a memorandum of understanding for both licenses.
Are you gonna be there tonight?
I'm hoping to try to get there tonight.
It's a 7 p.m. hotel there.
Right.
At Diamond Mall.
No, I've been to a few of their meetings, and it's a great council, actually.
Good. Phil, question to you, do they have adequate power or what? He mentioned it, but since you spend the time to come here, I want to talk to you and ask you.
This location has currently two service entrances. One's 100 amp, the other is 200 amp. In order to do what they propose to do, they need an 800 amp service. That's work we can do. We have given them an estimate of what that will be. I believe that was given to you in December from the notes I got. And so they understand what they need to do to have adequate power to do the operation they want. They've not yet proceeded to initiate that work with us, which, as we've talked before, is not all that unusual for folks who want to make sure they get approval before they spend the money to change the facility, but everything should be doable.
How long will it take you once you get notification to proceed?
I don't know, did we give you a time estimate?
I haven't gotten to that point yet, but, and actually our requirements, I think, are going to be a little bit less. I think we're looking at about 600 amps now. I mean, our engineer, our electrical engineer is, he's just finalized his drawings, which is the part of now getting back to 2 amps electric.
Yeah, one of the real advantages of, as we've talked before, this process is folks come and talk to us early so we can not delay them when they do decide to initiate. We know what we need to do, what materials we're going to need.
Well, thank you for being here, Phil. I appreciate you constantly coming here. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Sure. Well, just a parameter on the time. Is it months or a week?
For something this size, my guess is this is weeks.
That's weeks.
But I'm not,
That's what I
there's
figured,
50,
yeah.
there's 52 of those in a year, so.
Just talking to folks, it's not, I've asked the same question. I've heard that GS is great. They kind of, it's time to go, they get to it, get it done.
Amy?
Melody, Eric, can you show me which condition, addresses the videos? Because it's here in the.
So it's on the cultivation. It's not a condition on the retail, it's a condition on the cultivation, and right in the cultivation facility. So in section 2, condition 3, it's a licensing condition.
I was trying to figure out where the.
Pointing towards this entrance, there's no camera that covers.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out on the map. I was like, where? Yeah, when I looked at the map, I didn't know what she was talking about.
Okay, so, and I just wanted, so the parking, has had comments from traffic, parking markings on pavement.
looks like they've already kind of resolved it, they just got scrubbing.
An accessible, route to the main entrance.
Yeah.
That's all. Okay, so those comments came from traffic and then you dealt with them.
Yeah.
Okay. The snowstorm, okay. Anything else from the committee?
I just have a quick question too. When you, this is just amazing to me that you actually caught this. Do you actually go on the inspection site too and look? How did you catch that?
Generally, I don't go on, I've been on handle inspection. You know, we have a checklist, and I was just going through the checklist and checking that everything was met, and this was something that didn't.
That was one of the things that stuck out to me when I saw it initially. I'm like, how much? I just, and I think it's a testament. I think one of those things we can stop, and anybody who listens to the record, it goes to show what level of detail staff is going through to make sure every single thing is the way we need it to be. And I just wanted to point that out because I would have totally missed that. So when I saw that, I thought, how did they catch it? So I just want to say good job because that's fantastic.
You know, I had the very same thought when that took place. I said, wow, that is great. These are being, you know, from an applicant standpoint. I mean, this is sort of, you know, a plan very early in the process, but, you know, good work.
It really is.
Sometimes things like this don't get caught at this level, and they just get caught at the inspection, but it seems that if we can identify it at this point before you've actually had the system put in, it's gonna be more helpful for you
Yeah.
than to find out.
And it saves us money because then we'd fail the inspection, have to reschedule it after we installed it.
Surprised me. I couldn't figure out where the camera's gonna go, to be honest
It
with
was
you.
hard to describe verbally, so.
Okay, thanks.
Good, thanks. So, Nick, what are we gonna do?
I recommend we put this forward to the assembly for approval.
Second.
Any opposition? Good luck, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And that's for both. Okay. So we have next up is, I guess it's sort of the second look at the omnibus. This is not really omnibus anymore. We're trying to go steady, right?
Yeah, I think
So,
it's in there.
steady omnibus. Did you want to go through?
Sure. So as we have been implementing our marijuana regulations, there has been identified just some cleanup items needed both in the land use regulations and in the licensing regulations. So this is our land use omnibus, for lack of a better word, kind of cleanup. We did review a version of this at the end of September. And one of the things that we talked about most at that meeting was the modifications, how an approved application or an approved plan would be modified. And as you'll recall, we ended up dealing with that in a separate ordinance because there was some urgency in trying to allow more modifications to happen administratively just because we were seeing so many of them. So that has come out of this ordinance, so this version is different from what you saw at the end of September. The only thing that's been added is some clarification in section 2 and section 3 to make it more clear that the variance authority, which is being given to the assembly over variances from the marijuana regulations, are part of the are thus not, the authority does not lie with the Urban Design Commission, so it's just adding some language where the Urban Design Commission gets variance authority over the use regulations in chapter 5, there was already an exception for the telecommunication regulations, so we just added an exception for the marijuana regulations, just to have clarity and consistency throughout the code. So, just to refresh, we made it through about half of the ordinance at the end of September, and again, people may not remember, so I'm just gonna quickly go through again. Section 1 clarifies that when we use the term adult-oriented establishment, we're not talking about marijuana facilities. In the same way, we're not talking about alcohol facilities, even though there are restrictions about people under the age of 21 and alcohol in places where there's the sale of liquor. We're
only for sex-related businesses. Section 2 and 3 and 4, again, have to do with clarifying that the assembly has variance authority over the marijuana regulations. Sections 5 and then some later, we talk a lot about how the code is structured, and the uses are separated into, before we had marijuana, the uses were separated into 4 major categories: residential, community uses, commercial uses, and industrial uses. We made a new category for marijuana uses. So we went through the code, and every time we talk about these 4 different major categories of uses, I've added our 5th category, just so that we have equal treatment across the board of all the types of uses. So that is section 5. That is also the issue in sections, section 10, section 11, part of section 12, and section 13. Section 6, there's a little kind of cleanup at the beginning that's not really related to marijuana. It's, it is related to marijuana, because we don't have commercial marijuana in our accessory use table. So we just cleaned that up, cleaned up a little bit of language, added some variance criteria. So these variance criteria may be the most substantive item in this ordinance. So that should be something that you guys should take a special look at, and maybe we can come back after I finish going through the whole thing. Section 7 is again consistency in code language about clarifying the UDC doesn't do variances over marijuana establishments. In section 8, this adds clarification that we have discussed with one of our previous applications, where we are saying that a caretaker, we've allowed one caretaker unit as the only residential use allowed on the same lot as a marijuana facility, and we're clarifying that the caretaker has to be associated with the marijuana facility. It can't be a caretaker for a different use on the property and still count. And then we put in our sign regulations. You may recall that we saw that there was a bit of a loophole, that in the state language, the sign regulation only applies to retail establishments, but if you had a co-located retail and, say, cultivation facility, you could have somebody arguing that, well, we're going to put up a pole sign for our cultivation facility, not for a retail store, but in actuality it would be helpful for the retail. So this condition that we've been consistently placing on all applications would now become part of the code. One thing I did want to bring to your attention is my understanding of state regulations would prohibit, I didn't bring my state regulations, so I can't actually remember what they were saying, but I was thinking about the Arctic Herbery situation, where he was the first guy to open. He only has enough product to be open a couple days and then be closed. Like, did we want to allow a temporary sign that, you know, somebody could say, oh yes, we're open, or we're closed, so that people who are driving by could tell whether it's useful to go in or not? So that was something to consider.
Are we gonna take questions now, or do you want to get through it?
Can I just finish? Yeah, okay. So that was kind of a question for the body. Section B, under principal uses, this addresses the issue that we had with AK's Buzzy Buds, where we wanted to allow them to open their cultivation in B3 before their retail because of the scheduling situation at the state level. And while we don't think that's going to happen too much in the future, this does give the assembly, we had to do that by ordinance because we had to do a notwithstanding provision, but this would allow the assembly to approve a cultivation in the B3 as long as the retail sales application had been received. So that means we wouldn't have to do that by ordinance anymore. In B4, towards the bottom of page 7, this takes the sign regulations out of the retail sales because we've now moved sign regulations into the standards that are applicable to all types of marijuana facilities. Section 9, there are exemptions from some of the pedestrian requirements for industrial and utility facilities in the industrial and marine commercial and marine industrial zoning districts, and it seemed that these exemptions also made sense for industrial type marijuana facilities in the same industrial zone. So this is exempting a marijuana cultivation or manufacturing facility, again, which doesn't have public coming to it, from putting in a pedestrian walkway if they're in an industrial zone. Already section 10 was again adding the commercial marijuana type uses to where we listed other types, these major categories of uses. Also section 11. Section 12, looking at the chart on page 11, we had originally had large cultivation facilities require a type A loading berth. This came up with Isidore, the cultivation facility on A Street, International and A. A type A loading berth has to accommodate a tractor trailer, basically, and we didn't see that that was really ever going to be necessary. So we've changed the loading berth type of requirement to a type B loading berth, which is more for like a box fan sort of thing for cultivation and manufacturing facilities. In section 14 on page 12, we are adding a definition of public housing authority. This is something I've discussed with the legal department, and this would be something to make the assembly aware of, that, and I will provide you more information about this. I don't have it, I didn't think about bringing it with me today, but there is some thought that a tribal or Indian housing authority could be considered a public housing authority. So I'm gonna have to bring you more analysis on that issue, but the municipal attorney basically said this is going to have to be a policy call for the assembly. But basically, under the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation said that they were the only public housing authority in the state. Cook Inlet Housing is considered a tribal housing authority. So the federal drug-free regulations say that you have to have a drug-free zone around housing facilities owned by a public housing authority. And so whether or not you include an Indian housing authority as a public housing authority, my recollection, and again, I will get you more information, is that the law wasn't consistent in all places, and so it could really go either way. So again, I will provide you more information on that.
Sorry, that's state law?
Federal law.
That's that cold memo?
Yes. Well, it's the federal drug-free zone, and again, I mean, we're not in compliance with that anyway, because that's 1,000 feet, and we're using our state drug-free zone, which is 500 feet, so.
Changed as of yesterday, probably.
And then section 15 is making similar changes in the old code that we are making in the current Title 21 to address marijuana facilities in the downtown districts, which are still covered by old code. So the language there is just consistent with earlier sections.
Okay, good, thank you. I've got comments on this about every page. Do you want to go page by page? Not a lot.
Yeah.
So you want to go page by page then? Yeah, does that work? Okay. Sort of, I don't know, first page, I don't have any comments. Anything else? Okay, this, you know, I think this might be fine tuning, but this description of adult-oriented establishment goes, other than existence of commercial marijuana, there is existence of some got their pocket or some. Is it, and I was thinking, or should we say, other than the sales, growing, manufacturing, or
responsibility planning, but what that entails is really up to the assembly to evaluate. You know, we created this draft MOU, but they are not required to have that because we didn't want them to be held hostage to a community council that refused to sign it. So they are required, so what the, so what the code says, just a minute.
Do you have copies of what we're looking at? Were you guys tracking along?
No, we're just observing.
Do you want a copy so you can flip through and see this? Copy? We're on page 5.
So under the retail, sales establishment, it says, assembly issuance of special land use permits for marijuana establishments and the related licensing and regulation of marijuana establishments under AMC Title 10 require engagement by the community council. The owner-operator of a marijuana retail sales establishment is encouraged to engage in neighborhood responsibility planning with neighborhood residents and other businesses. Where available, this may be done in conjunction with the community council. A copy of an informal memorandum of understanding outlining the elements confirmed with the community council may be included with the application. In the absence of a MOU, the applicant may include the applicant's report on the status of community engagement efforts. So what they provide may be an MOU or it may be something different. What we are looking for in the application is evidence that they've done some sort of community engagement, and then it's up to the assembly to evaluate whether the engagement efforts were sufficient.
We kept that there, John, because some community councils take off in the summer. In some cases, it's easier for the applicant to have a neighborhood meeting.
So I understand that, it's just evidence of, I thought it was a requirement.
But it's nice that they've got this image coming in.
Okay, well, that sounds okay.
I mean, again, we weren't requiring a plan or an MOU, it was evidence that they had done this engagement.
They tried,
And
yeah.
it's just leaving it very much open.
Francis is very patiently.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, just like Erica said, the downtown community council refuses to sign any of the MOUs. They just won't sign the neighborhood responsibility planning MOU, so.
I'm sure Northeast would have refused it.
Well, and this is something that I think I was the sponsor of the community engagement thing. And it's exactly for the reason everybody's saying is, we specifically use the word may, or we encourage them to do this, because one of the things that I know when we're sitting up there, one of the first things we look at in the packet is, or I look at, is, okay, what was the response of the community council, what was the response of the neighborhood, what issues were identified as potential problems, and how did they attempt to address them. So to me, you know, it's just like everybody's saying, if somebody goes to a community council and no matter what they say, no matter how reasonable the attempts are to mitigate the issue, if somebody just says no to say no, I don't really, you know, I'm not just gonna say somebody just because of that. I have to, you know, there has to be a basis, and so I think we intentionally didn't want to make it mandatory.
Okay. I have a question, maybe just a quick follow-up. Why will they not?
You know, I've never been to that community council. I heard they're kind of curmudgeon. I bet Jana, who's working on this issue, could speak to that.
Yeah, they actually were pretty engaging, and we had a good debate about it and everything, and they created a marijuana advisory committee within their community council, and they've just taken the position that they don't want to sign any MOUs, but they give you a letter saying that they have no objection if they have no objection, and that you engage in being presented and whatnot.
I just to finish my thought, I think the biggest thing for me personally when we inserted this in there is we wanted to make sure that a marijuana establishment didn't intentionally go around their community council. Like, oh, I'm gonna have a quick meeting in, you know, this place, and I'm not really gonna notice it very well, and I'm just, we didn't want to go around. We wanted to show that there was a meaningful attempt to engage the community council.
Did I cut you off?
No, I just forgot my thought.
We were thinking about places like Art of Burberry. Remember when we did that one? He went to community council, but then we had a couple of people show up during the public hearing and said, we don't want to come in here no matter what happens. But at least we gave them the opportunity to go to the community council and voice their opposition that way.
I was just gonna suggest that, I mean, some of that just comes down to semantics in a way. It sounded as though the evidence of might not have been a real clear thing to you, but it might be that we just said documentation, community. I mean, that's fundamentally what we're asking.
Evidence is fine. I thought it was required that they, but evidence sounds like
This evidence of planning,
matches what we're doing.
not a plan. But,
So if you, when a variance comes forward, it would be the property owner, not the applicant necessarily, or is it? who
No, we would be the applicant requesting a variance from the marijuana regulations.
Yeah, from the marijuana.
Yes,
Okay,
so-
if it were a land use, because we had like, the last agreement, that was, okay, the property owner had to come in and get the variances. So, but here we're just talking about marijuana rules in that case.
I want that to come to the same like nobody else. I want those to come to the same like nobody else.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
And I'll just say on this section, this is my favorite section of the entire part. And there's two parts that I really like about this, because we've talked about this. We have had some specific, unique properties that is unique to them and no one else would have this issue. And so, and I really like the fact that how it was written, because it says to approve a variance, the assembly shall consider. It doesn't dictate, but it just shows you have to have done your due diligence. You have to consider these things, and it gives us pretty much basis and rationale. I think it gives us cover for why we do what we do to show that we've been thoughtful. But the other thing I like is on the next page, where you cleaned up the part talking about the UBC, just clarifying the fact that it is the assembly and only the assembly that can do this with marijuana establishments. So in the whole scheme of things, when I was looking at the variances, that was my favorite part, because I thought, well, that just clears it up.
One small point of this is that, do you need to show renumbering? They have this 10, I'm not sure I was.
There's nothing after it.
There's, I had something where 10 is expiration or something, but I may have all.
So we are in B.
Not everything I have is exactly as something. Did you ever?
Well, mine's in this, temporary sign thing I brought up last night.
Well, you don't have to, you take a look.
Yeah, good point, I'll check, I'll double check on that.
Okay, so the next page 6, anybody, that had the caretaker's residence, I think we've been through that pretty thoroughly before. Okay, 7 with temporary sign.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the situation that we have right now is, our cultivation, has not caught up to our retail. We have more demand than we have supply. And so I think the idea that the retail places, typically once everything is working and up, to full production, people are gonna know they can go to the store and there'll be stuff there. It's like, you don't call 7-Eleven to see if they got any soda left,
Try ice melt this time of year, there is none.
Well, I'll be right about that. So I think the temporary sign actually makes sense, at least for maybe the next 6 months or so, at least. Because people will be wondering, I wonder if anything's come in today, And so they'll drive by, and if there's an open sign on there, they can pull in. The sign says closed, and then they figure they're out of stock.
I have a question about temporary signs. So in my mind, a temporary sign is like one of those little plastic or things you throw out the window. But what about, I think at Costco, they sell these like lighted up signs, that you hang them up and they're hard plastic and they say open, you can turn the light on, you can turn the light off.
For this, I was thinking more of something like a sandwich board that would go out at the street, because you have some of these that are set back where you may, you're driving by and you may not see the open sign on the building or in the window. And so something that would, give them the flexibility to put something out that would catch the eye of the passerby, of the driver.
What do we allow in other businesses?
I don't know.
Because I would like to see consistency.
Okay.
So that's me personally. But like I said, so those little lighted things at Costco, are those considered temporary signs?
No, I think those are considered permanent signs.
So somebody could get one of those and put it in their window, and when they're open, just turn it on,
Yeah.
and when they're closed, just turn it off, and.
But in some situations, you may not be able to see that from the road.
I just don't wanna see, create a whole new special circumstance. I'd like to see consistency in law.
But I also don't wanna see distractions for drivers, you know, so anyways, it's just something to think about, because I just don't know.
Okay.
Erica, temporary signs, sandwich signs, Granny's Guns on Dowling and Lake Otis. Gun store has been open for about a year with a temporary sign. Nobody tries to remove it, it just says, just now, just opened. Yeah, a year and a half ago. So what does the city do to take out temporary signs? Do we have to have somebody drive by and run into it to get rid of it, or what?
Enforcement is complaint based, so somebody has to complain.
Hey Dick, I have your number.
So that's all right, I have other ways to remove them. The question is, if we let marijuana, what's gonna stop somebody from leaving it up there for 6 months, a year? I mean, temporary should be temporary. 30 days or 15 days, and then it has to be taken down. I wanna make sure we don't make temporary permanent.
Well, let me, try to provide you with some more information about what the regulations are for other businesses, and we can bring this issue back up.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and then that might be a good, like negotiated in between too. If you do allow a special circumstance for temporary signs, for it to be really temporary and not something that turns into something permanent. So whatever you can come up with.
Well, you know, I was actually in the restaurant business and had a sandwich board sign.
On you or what?
It was picked up regularly and disappeared, and I had to remake it, I don't know, half a dozen times over 15 years, because, you know, temporary signs were not allowed, and so somebody, whenever the competition down the street hired a new manager and he saw my sign, they'd call in and complain and it would disappear.
Stop.
So.
Gary?
Mr. Chairman, there are provisions in Title 21 for temporary signage, and it's not, so it isn't specific just to marijuana. But I would also note that as Erica's indicated, it is totally complaint driven. As of May of 2016, the amortization provisions for most signs in Anchorage expired. So a huge number of existing signs all over Anchorage, the big diamond parking sign by the airport, they're all illegal. And nothing really will happen to it until somebody complains, but it's something lurking.
Yeah, just a thought that, some retail marijuana establishments don't have any windows. Or if they have a window, it's been like blacked out, like reinforced and all of that. So you think of the example of Anchorage on Spinard in the old House of Hobbies. If there was any window there before, I think it's been removed, blocked off, or steel trapped or whatever. If you go to a restaurant, you don't know if it's gonna be open or closed, you might be able to tell because the light shining on from inside through a window. But for some of the marijuana retail, they don't have windows.
Why does enforcement have to be complaint driven? Why can't the city just take it upon themselves to have people drive around, code enforcement or somebody? Well, that sign's been there for a long time, let's tell the store to take it down and remove it.
They do. There's good.
I thought you were saying it was complaint driven only.
Well, if you speak with the code enforcement officer, they'll say that, in their area, because they're assigned areas, in some instances they'll enforce upon because they notice a violation. But what Erica said is true, that it's complaint driven process.
Okay. Because next Wednesday I go to Federation Monthly, I'll have the whole Federation to talk to. And I intend to tell them, you don't like temporary signs? Call code enforcement, file a complaint then.
Did anyone
I hear it
mention,
all the time.
sorry, did anyone mention that for temporary signs, they do have to have a permit, and I think they're allowed to have signs up for 90 days during a calendar year, but you've gotta get a temporary sign permit.
Well, and part of, I think that's what Erica was gonna bring back to us, is kind of what the rules are. Yeah, so we hadn't talked about that.
Which is a temporary sign can be processed.
I couldn't tell you, don't know.
I don't know dates, that's what
Well, I was just gonna make the point as a former enforcement officer in the city, we had a situation, Dick, to kind of talk about your question. We had a situation about 10 years ago where enforcement officers were actually proactively enforcing, and it became a problem, and we were told and directed to operate on a complaint-only basis. So years they've operated that way. You know, to be completely honest with you, an enforcement officer could probably find a problem, a violation on every property that they look at. So, you know, it's probably not fair to proactively enforce. So they've been doing it that way for approximately 10 years.
This is good information, but it sounds like a whole different.
Okay, it's good information, thank you.
Well, so, but where are we on this? So this,
We're on
you say we
7.
come up, we're on 7, it says, you've got fairly standard information here, but then you've highlighted no temporary signs are permitted, just for the discussion.
Yeah.
So do we, I mean, at this point, they are covered by the sign law. Everyone is, every business, so do we need that? I mean, we're saying none whatsoever for marijuana, or just follow the law?
That was in there because of something in the state code, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna
it
need to
is.
come back and give you more.
Oh, that's a
Erica,
state.
it is, through the chair, it is, in a state code that you can't have a sign for marijuana retail with a retail name, unless it's affixed or attached to the building. So that's the one thing I was gonna say, maybe if you are gonna allow temporary signs, it's gotta be like product available.
Or open or closed.
Or, yeah, or open or closed, but the actual name unfortunately isn't.
And I would say this is some of the things we start to drift into when we start thinking outside the boxes. You have to think about what are all the other things people are gonna put on these sandwich boards, right? So again, I go back to my drinking marijuana leaves. We don't want to, I mean, that's obviously not really gonna happen, but, we have to be a little bit thoughtful. So I'd like a little bit more analysis before we make any recommendations on that one.
Well, sandwich boards are covered in the sign law, they're not allowed in most places anyway.
Again, I apologize, I don't have the temporary sign regulations.
Eric, if you just bring us the current requirements, we'd
Yes.
appreciate that, because I know I saw one picture taken out of Colorado, somebody had a signboard they put up there. It's a picture of Santa Claus with marijuana leaves on his back. And that was a temporary sign they put it there to try and attract attention. Don't want to see that here in Anchorage. Thank you.
Sorry, Pete.
You know, I'm willing to go with just the allowing only an open sign or a closed sign. I think that makes perfect sense considering the market situation that we find ourselves in.
I wonder if we would get into any freedom of speech issues, because I know in the past when we talked about what kind of campground signs, Department of Law has weighed in. So I think that, like I said, this is a more complicated issue than maybe it seems on its face. So I think a little bit more analysis would be helpful, because if we try to dictate to somebody, you can only say open or you can only say closed, we might actually get, a first time issue.
So that would just be on the temporary sign.
Mm-hmm. I just don't know how it would be structured. I think it'd be helpful.
I'll check in the law as well.
You know, another alternative, just refer to, all signs must conform with, refer to the section with our sign law, which is fairly extensive, and then maybe add, and also state law.
It only says that on the first sentence.
So that was all state regulations in chapter 21.11.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty good to me. And I mean, an open sign, that's a temporary sign, every single retail store in this country is a violation. We all have open, closed signs.
Right, and again, I think some of this came from looking at the state law, which basically said all the signs have to be attached to the building, except then it really says signs with the business name. So then it's like, well, so you can put anything else out in other ways, so it's trying to provide some, interpretation.
As a retailer, when I think of temporary sign, I don't think, oh, a sandwich board out front. I think, I put in my window this huge sign that says Free Comic Book Day is for Saturday in May. That's a temporary sign, and we put it up for 2 weeks, and then we got some other big event. We got Black Friday, and we put huge big black signs on the windows. Those are temporary signs. Not thinking, but that's normal retail to do that. You go through the mall, drive around, you can see that. So, would a marijuana place be restricted from that? That's normal retail. I don't want to say they can't do what's normal in retail.
Well, I think that's why I was saying, would we already do and would we already allow, because they should be able to do what we already allow, I would think. I just think when it comes to like sandwich boards and all these other things, now we're kind of going into an area, I just don't know. I don't remember, I don't know why.
I mean, it's in the sign law, which is very extensive.
Nice and mild, John.
There. Okay.
Really?
Is this on tape?
Is this being recorded?
We were at the forefront of cleaning up Sonora.
The other portion then, page 7 of 14, when you get down to the section, it's B1, B4. This right here, I think, has been one of the things we've talked about as we're bringing that application forward in the B3 district. And I think this is a nice little cleanup here. And it just shows that they have, you know, even if we have mixed use, that we can move forward without that special language. So I think that's a nice little cleanup addition right there.
Can I ask a clarification question? So, is it a completed application to the muni, like it's completed, submitted to the planners, they've looked over it and scheduled it for an assembly, or is it completed, deemed by the state completed?
The municipality.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I had a question on this. Is this relevant anymore? It was relevant before because the state was only doing cultivation initially and then they switched.
It seems, I mean, again, I think generally things probably will be able to go forward in concert, you know, retail and cultivation, but if there is some issue that pops up with the retail, either at the state level or, I don't know, it just kind of, it's in case something strange happens, this still gives the assembly flexibility.
But the strange thing might be the state rejects the retail, now we're in a pickle.
Or the state holds it up because there's some big missing piece of information, so they're not gonna reject it, they're just not. Suddenly they've been separated in the timeline.
Yeah, I was uncomfortable when we did that because if their retail got refused, then where are we?
Well, then
So their cultivation has to go away, and I think the applicants are made aware of that and are willing to take that risk.
Going to roll the dice.
Anything else? I'm sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The very last line on page 7 says temporary signs, no temporary signs are permitted. So we either have to eliminate that or this will.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that we're not planning on taking action on this. Erica's gonna come back with her analysis. And then at a future meeting, we'll make it, we'll kind of look at what she does.
Just want to make sure people know this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
He's on the bottom of page 7 of 14.
And that's deleted
I
language.
don't know if he's.
Oh, that's deleted?
That's
It's being
deleted out of
deleted.
the retail
That's being deleted.
because it's been replaced in the, overall.
Can I just clarify something about this?
I didn't notice the first thing.
Because maybe, listening to your comments, maybe I misinterpreted what I was reading. So, in the municipality of Anchorage, if you're located in B3, if you have a cultivation facility, you need to also have a retail facility. And some of the issues we were having, or we talked about when some of these cultivation facilities are coming through, is you have to have both. And some we knew they were coming, so we're like, okay, well, let's let them go ahead with their cultivation, because the retail's in the pipe, right? So when I saw this is all I was thinking about. I wasn't thinking about I did not mean that on purpose. I always make these puns unintentionally. But I wasn't thinking about the fact that maybe their state license was held up. I was just thinking about the fact, what is our zoning district's requirement, right? So am I misinterpreting that? I mean, because my understanding is if you don't have a state license yet, you can't actually start until you have the state license and the muni license. So to me, it's not, if it's necessarily held up at the state, because no matter what, they have to have both licenses. This is just dealing with our land use and our requirement that if you're in B3, you gotta have both. So I was reading this as a cleanup of saying, yeah, we know you have a complete application in the municipality, we're gonna go ahead because now we're basically codifying our previous actions kind of in some of these cases. Am I understanding?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right.
Okay. Because once I was hearing the conversation, I thought, well, maybe I was wrong.
I mean, Mr. Weldon's question, as I understand it, is we had this issue because the state was doing only cultivation and testing for a while, and they were postponing looking at retail manufacturing, so the AK Fuzzy Brothers people couldn't bring both of their applications together. They couldn't do their retail ahead of their cultivation. And Mr. Weldon's saying, well, isn't that done with? Aren't we not going to see that situation again? And I think that's probably generally true, but this, in case
there is some weird situation that we haven't thought of. And the only thing I can think of is somebody does submit their cultivation and their retail together to the state at the same time, and the state pushes the cultivation forward and says this is complete, you can move ahead, but the retail for some reason is held up for longer. It just gives the assembly some flexibility. But no, I think the way you've been interpreting it is exactly correct.
Okay, thank you.
Janet?
So shouldn't we apply the same clarification to the extraction and manufacturing section?
I don't think they have the same issue.
Not for the extraction, manufacturing, we had to be, if we were B3, we had to be. Maybe I got that wrong.
Extraction should have the same issue.
You don't need to have a retail facility, you just can.
For
you're only
manufacturing
limited-
at all?
you're limited to manufacturing edibles.
But, so for extracting though?
Marijuana manufacturing facilities that only manufacture edibles but do not have extraction facilities or other types of manufacturing are permitted in the B3 district.
Okay, so but if we have extraction, then we're not in B3 at all?
Correct.
Okay, that's where I was getting confused at.
Okay,
Even with the retail.
so we're moving on from, then we've got page 8. Anything on 8? I have one on that very bottom there, about the pedestrian connections. It's not applied to single facility, or to marijuana cultivation facility, marijuana manufacturing. How about testing? Is there an issue there?
I still think you have, so the idea of who's gonna need your pedestrian walkway, I mean, you still, with testing, you still have people coming and going. And so, I mean, if somebody wants to say, no, you don't need it for testing, then that's your decision, but it seems like you still have visitors to testing. It's not the general public, but it is people coming and going more than just employees who, come in and stay for 8 hours and then leave or however long.
We can actually adopt, I mean, the testing, my concept is it's just business to business, like we talked earlier, but apparently where Alaska Green has had a testing facility that was testing marijuana by individuals. And is that allowed now?
Yeah, I believe that is allowed, yeah, that if you have a personal grade, you can take it to be tested. But I mean, even if it's business to business, you still have multiple people coming and going from the site who need to get from their vehicles to the front door.
But so would a, so would a, wholesale, businesses will go in and pick up a day's supply.
It's just the traffic would be less frequent. But again, it's a policy call.
Well, and I was thinking too with testing, if you just talk about like the bakery, I mean, they could potentially be going in every single day, right? And if we have a lot of them, I could see the traffic being in a testing facility much more than what we would initially think, right? Because everybody has to get everything tested, pretty much, if you're selling to the public. And there's only 2 testing facilities, right?
That's right.
And so I would actually expect the traffic would be much more for a testing facility than it would be for a general, like, manufacturer. Because they're gonna have the products, or, they'll have, the stores coming in, but they don't have to have their stuff tested every day like the bakery maybe does. So I was fine the way it was originally written, just because I just assumed the testing facilities would be actually very busy.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I actually agree. I think the testing facilities will be busier as time goes on. They'll become more busy. And, I don't necessarily think they need a lot of parking spaces, but the 1 or 2 or 3 that they have are gonna be, there's gonna be someone coming every 15 or 20 minutes or half hour probably. Because, there's a lot of applications out there, and I think, once all the businesses get open, that if we only have 2 testing facilities, they're gonna be open 8-10 hours a day to do all the work on that.
Like the lady said this morning, she was gonna bake some cookies, brownies. What happens if that batch isn't any good? She has to throw those out. Then you've gotta bake some more. And she could be going constantly, get them tested.
But their business plan said they plan to be there for 5 hours a day, so it's kind of like Banker's Hour Baker. That would sound pretty good.
It's the first bakery.
Mr. Chairman, the one thing I think I would point out in this is that for a lot of the sites that we've dealt with, it's actually been quite a bit of a hurdle for particularly older industrial sites that don't have great parking, don't have everything else. But the requirement then is to get us a walkway connection from the street to the front door of the business. Is that really what we're talking about in this case? That has been a difficulty for a lot of these businesses to actually accomplish. And I certainly understand it for a retail where someone might be coming down the general sidewalk and going to the sidewalk to the front door. But many of these in the industrial areas, whether it's a testing lab or a cultivation facility, there aren't any sidewalks that are on the street to even really connect to. We talk about having to connect out to the street with these, but they don't really go anywhere. It's just an expense we're imposing on these businesses that doesn't really accomplish it.
Well, and Terry, the way this is written, this doesn't alleviate that burden from the testing facility. It's only cultivation and manufacturing. So I think the way it's being presented, in which I agree with, is that the testing facilities are probably going to have a lot more traffic, people coming in and out for the day. So that's why the requirement's still there on the testing facility. Am I reading that right? So this right here would alleviate the burden for cultivation and manufacturing, but not testing.
But I think the point there is testing. People drive their car because they're not going to be carrying on it while they're not walking to these things. So they're driving, they're parking.
And these testing facilities to date have ended up in more industrial locations.
One is an industrial and one's an commercial.
So if you're in industrial, do you probably have to have a connection to the street? Something new? I mean, a warehouse, say a warehouse is built in I-1, do they have to have a sidewalk?
It's been interpreted.
This this subsection does not apply to single and two-family development or to industrial and utility facility uses. So a regular industrial use, a warehouse would not have to do that.
But a testing lab in I-1 would have to have a,
Yes.
like a little sidewalk. So Alaska
And
Green is
commercial
I-1.
business in I-1 would have to do it.
And then we have the other testing facilities down at the port, Ship Creek. And it's, so very industrial there. And what do we do there then? Do they have to put a sidewalk?
No. Can't test, no. I mean, I don't think.
And why was that?
I don't, remember what the approved site plan for that facility, looked like. But I think that was when we initially started seeing this conflict of industrial uses not requiring it, but marijuana being, not specifically excluded. I can't tell you what the final approved site plan looked like. I know that there was a lot that went back and forth about that site plan because basically half the property had non-conforming rights from things and half the property didn't because they built it in spaces for them.
Okay.
Maybe a compromise would be like if the marijuana establishment, as long as it was cultivation, manufacturing, and testing, if it was in an industrial area, then it wouldn't have to have the pedestrian walkway. And then if you're in the business, commercial area, and you're retail testing, since industrial uses aren't required anyways, like so we have like a.
We don't consider testing to be an industrial use.
Right, but I mean,
But
say like
so
a
you're
steel
just
shop.
proposing adding
Yeah.
testing to this, which is traditional elements.
Kind of my knee-jerk feeling.
I agree with it. Makes sense. It's requiring the business or, and not an industrial area, an industrial walkway.
So if you're in the commercial districts, have a walkway, it's still industrial.
I tend to disagree. I agree with Eric on this one because of what we're talking about, the potential for the higher number of people going in and out of testing facilities. I think when I look at it, I think this is the compromise, honestly, because we're talking, we pulled out, release the burden basically from cultivation and manufacturing, which if I'm just thinking about the use and the potential, there's only 2 testing facilities, the potential for traffic going in and out, I think it only makes sense that testing still has to have a walkway or some sort of way, especially if maybe they're in some of these locations that don't have great parking. I mean, to me, I don't know, I look at this one as already the compromise. That's just me, so.
Okay. to move on from this. We only have a few more minutes, and I guess if we mull it over, I mean, at some point, we could probably discuss this again in the committee.
Yeah, it's not, it hasn't been introduced.
Okay. Okay, so page 9.
Yeah, there's many changes, John. I thought we were gonna have all kinds of.
I had a lot of red on it, but I guess it changes. And then, okay, so then we have discussion on page 12. So where do we go?
I would also like the opportunity to provide some more information about this issue before, you discuss or make a recommendation, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Can we go back to 11 just for a second? And I just wanna say, I think you guys are spot on with this, the loading birth dock issue, because there's been a couple things that come before us for like, really, a tractor trailer having to get in there, it just didn't make sense.
And the traffic engineer does have the authority to reduce the living birth requirement from an A to a B, so that was how we resolved it with Isidore, but they shouldn't, it doesn't make sense that they would actually have to go ask, so I'm kind of surprised we didn't catch this in our first.
No, I agree.
I think you're pessimistic about the potential growth of this industry. Fill a 45.
Well,
They can't get a product, John. Can't get a product.
They will, 5 years, this is brand new. Okay, well, thank you. 10, 11, 12, 11, that's all I had. So the plan on this is you'll just come back and we'll schedule it for future meeting, which
Yeah,
is
I
a
mean, I
month
think we
or.
do it 2 weeks maybe.
Is any of this really hugely pressing? We had some we did earlier.
I mean, I definitely think by pulling the modifications out and doing that separately, that was the most pressing thing. I think it would be helpful to get the sign issue resolved and so not to stall. So yeah, I don't think it's like, oh, we have to do it tomorrow, but I think if I could get more information back to you in a couple of weeks, we can just keep it moving.
I think that clarification on walkways and inductive would be helpful to the applicants. Because like Terry said, it's a cost, and it's, they have to find the space, and it's, if they're thinking that they just want to do interior remodel to do their license type, but then we're saying they have to make exterior improvements, then this is one thing maybe added together with others that is really a big deal to them.
Did you have any in the works right now that this is a tipping point?
Not that I know of, but in a way, they're all subject to it, right? Well, if they're in the industrial.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to clarify, so this 21-1206, right now, as it sits, it doesn't apply to commercial marijuana, and that's what we're gonna be doing, is potentially adding commercial marijuana into 21-1260. So does that mean that we can stop for all the applications that have been completed and approved by the assembly, or even just completed? We don't have to do this whole 10% assessed value of the structure if you're doing more than, improving it, yada, yada, yada. Cause that's been a big kicker for our guys. And so now I kind of see now that Eric is fixing a little loophole that we kind of have. So if things have been completed to the date of whenever this gets adopted, I would assume all of those previously completed applications would be accepted.
I'm sorry, which section, which page?
It is page 11. Page 11, 21-12-060. Because we're obviously making, one of my build outs is like almost $1 million.
Okay, can you just start over?
Yeah, sure, sorry.
You have to speak English, not numbers.
Yeah, sorry about that. So this section 21-12-060.
So bringing characteristics into compliance.
Right, so if we do a project that is more than 10% of the assessed value of the building, we have to apply 10% of our project cost towards coming into conformance more. So in a memo, and I don't know, author, I think Terry did this, that includes the electrical upgrades, which is a huge cost for us, right? So that almost immediately puts almost all these guys in this category where they have to spend an additional 10% of their total project cost towards coming into conformance. So for one of my facilities, this is almost $1 million of a build out of a piece of property they don't even own. They're just building out, increasing its value, increasing the property value of it as
So laws that we pass, if something's already been approved, now, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but laws that have, or applications, things that have already been approved, when we pass a new law, it doesn't apply ex post facto.
Okay, great, that's just what I wanted to clarify.
We've been applying, so this section as well as other sections of code have been intended to apply to basically all development, and so it has been, the department has been applying it to all development, even though it wasn't specifically listed, because the intent was to catch all categories.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding her question. What I'm understanding she's saying is, things that have already been approved, things that have already been, you're good to go forth and conquer. If we pass this now, are we gonna retroactively go back to that application and say, now you have to do this different? And to me, the answer is no.
Well, my question is that we've already been told that we have to do this 10% of our project costs going towards conformity, but reading this, it doesn't, this applicability section here, number 1, only lists 4 uses, it doesn't list marijuana uses. I'm sorry, it only lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 uses, it doesn't list commercial marijuana uses. Now we're adding commercial marijuana uses, so for me, that says, well, it didn't apply before, because why would we need to apply it?
Okay, I understand what you're saying now, but what I'm understanding the department to say is, basically, they're just clarifying that they're already interpreting all multifamily, commercial, mixed-use, community use. And in there, you're already saying commercial use is marijuana use, or whatever commercial use you're doing. So they're already interpreting the code that way, and now they're just clarifying. Is that right? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably gonna push back on that, because, commercial uses is a whole nother subsection of one of those use charts, and adding marijuana use is the reason we had to do change of uses, which caused all those issues, because otherwise we could just be going retail to retail.
So let me ask you a question. Are you gonna push back on the fact that the UDC doesn't get to, give variances for marijuana?
No.
Okay, so why would you not push back on that and push back on this?
Because I think the assembly should have that authority.
Exactly. So the point is, the code wasn't clear before with, variances for marijuana use. And there could have been somebody arguing, well, the UDC should be allowed to.
Right.
But we're clarifying, so to me, when I'm reading this now, this is a clarification.
See, and I would just disagree on that, but I think maybe that's a longer discussion to have, because, this bringing this into, Carasec into compliance, we're talking hundreds of thousands that people are gonna additionally have to put into a fund.
Which is already now having to be done, because this is how the department's interpreting the code, right?
Theoretically, that is how it's being interpreted now.
Okay.
But
So now I'm understanding it, I appreciate it. I'll just stop and see if anybody else has anything.
So, but this was a policy goal. We could remove this if the assembly were to do that.
well, it's not even in there.
But here's the thing.
Or not added.
Here's the thing, Pete. So now trying to understand what everybody's saying, what we're saying, what we're being told is, this is already how the department is interpreting the law. They're basically making them stick to all the other standards that are already out there, commercial standards and whatnot. But in the code, nobody ever put marijuana, commercial marijuana in the code, even though that's already how it's being applied. So this right here would be a clarification saying, yes, we are applying it this way, this is how we're gonna continue to apply it. Right?
Sorry. So I would only interject, I know we're just about out of time, but we put together a little bit of a policy letter on this, only because the requirements that are associated with that are not very easily understood in Title 21. And marijuana does have some really unique circumstances. So as an example, consider that you're a laboratory opening and you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on equipment. Does that equipment count as building upgrades, or is it simply furnishings that you're including in the project? So we made some interpretations. Fundamentally, if you were to draw a line, what we're trying to interpret is that if when you leave that business, you're taking that equipment with you, it doesn't count toward those improvements. If that equipment would be permanent and part of that building going forward, then we say that it would count. So, for example, and it's true, the electrical improvements are huge, but you're not gonna pack up that transformer and take it with you. So fundamentally, what we did was we created kind of a line about what is included in those improvements and what is not included. So,
Okay. just offhand, so we'll be continuing discussion on this, if you could bring us a copy, send us a copy,
Yeah,
bring that.
I'd be happy to.
And, you know, non-conformities are created when the assembly decides to change land use standards. And over the years, you know, the old code was essentially from the sixties, and it had been amended a bunch, and standards has changed, and the community standards have changed as acreage has grown and developed. And so the non-conforming section is intended to apply to basically every non-conforming situation in an attempt to help our city move towards, you know, those locations which were constructed according to standards that we don't have, that are not acceptable to us anymore. That every situation is intended to move a little bit towards conformity. So the fact that commercial marijuana was not specifically listed was really just learning how to organize our new code. But the intent of the non-conforming section is to apply to all parcels in development in the municipality. So that's why it's been interpreted in that fashion.
No. Okay, just a final comment there. I mean, I agree with that, because every other business has to deal with it. To exempt marijuana, that's not fair.
Well, I'm just saying exempt the listing, the initial boost. It might be like a good, to get this industry off the ground, the base that's actually gone through and through the learning mistakes on both sides, through administration, which has costed us, you know, money, and through our mistakes too. As we kind of bear the cost of working this out.
Okay, anything else? We have a meeting on Monday that will, I think the only thing on there is the steep slopes ordinance. So that we're prepared for that on Tuesday, because it is becoming time sensitive. So, see you all.
And I was gonna say, the Chuquequi River Advisory Board is meeting on Saturday.
I'm presuming it's the library, but I don't have
Yeah.
time on it right now, so.
I think it's right around June.
Good,
And can we, so will we get a